everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Sideline Intel NBA podcast. As always, this is Jeff Griffith. Joining me via Zoom is Jacob Rosenfarb. Jacob, talk to me. How's your week going?
Week's going swell, Jeff. Playoff basketball is in full swing. NFL is coming back. MLB is heating up. It's a great week of sports.
Good time to be a Padres fan, right, Jacob?
Slam Diego returns. How can I complain?
I can't say I'm really particularly loving the baseball season, but I'm ready for football. We've talked a lot about our fantasy leagues, which we are excited for. I'm excited to watch fanless football. I'm excited for my Cardinals and highest paid receiver in the league, DeAndre Hopkins, to ball out. But this is a basketball podcast, so we're not going to get too far into that. Lots happening, as always. It's the playoffs. What do you expect? We could go any direction to start this thing off, but we'll go timely. To start ourselves off here with the Heat and the Bucks. Last night, as of recording, it's Wednesday morning. Last night, Tuesday, we saw the Heat finish off the Milwaukee Bucks in 5 games. Jacob, you might not be the best person to answer this question, but I'll ask it anyway. If I'm telling you in February that the Heat are almost sweeping the Bucks out of the playoffs in the second round, what's your response?
I mean, I think it's "I told you so." I think would be my response at the time.
Shut up.
No. In all seriousness, I think this Bucks team, had some flaws we could all acknowledge, but I think we all assumed kind of Giannis's greatness and some adjustments from Mike Budenholzer would cover those, and they have not. They've been even more exposed come playoff time. And so I think it's an interesting point at the Bucks franchise. I think this probably starts their most strenuous offseason in franchise history in terms of, they may need a new coach. They clearly need a new surrounding cast, and Giannis has 1 year of free agency. So I think before free agency. So I think it's stressful times. It is a difficult end of the season, and I'm very curious to see how they react.
Yeah, we talked about this before the podcast. We could get into the X's and O's of this series, but I think we all know what happened. We all know that this Heat team is very balanced. We all know that Jimmy Butler is a great playoff basketball player. We all know that like you said, the Bucks have their flaws and they were exposed. And Giannis wasn't himself. He was also hurt for a game. I guess a game and a half is more accurate. But I think more aptly we should discuss where these teams go from here. And I guess we can start with the Bucks because this is their offseason now. They are, which is weird to say. It's weird to say that they're entering the offseason. Just weird to think about. Especially now that it's September, but that's a whole other thing. The Bucks. I know we gave a little talk to them last week about what on earth do they do with this team. Let's play Bucks front office right now. Let's have this conversation. What on earth are we doing about this team? We've now seen them fail out of 2 playoffs in a row. They've got clear flaws in the way their roster is built. Giannis is a beast. We're running out of time. What do we do?
I think the first question they need to answer is how they view Chris Middleton. If they view him as a legit second option guy, as a second best player on a championship team, then I think you move on. But personally, I'm not of that camp. I would be surprised after these playoffs if they also felt that way. So I agree. My point is, I wonder if they look to shop him. He seems like the asset that would get the most value back for them. Because definitely their most valuable asset, and beyond that, it's a little bare. You know what I mean? I don't think going to want Eric Bledsoe's contract. You have a couple nice, pieces in maybe DJ Wilson or Dante DiVincenzo, but if we're talking difference maker assets, it's Chris Middleton. And so there's been a lot of speculation about Chris Paul. That has been a popular trade target. I think that makes some sense. I don't know. Beyond that, though, it gets real slim real quick. I think I'm not exactly sure if they're going to stay with Bud, and if they do, are they trying to build a team around Bud's system? Because I kind of worry if that's the reason. That's how they got in this point, is they found guys who fit Bud's system. They found shooters, and they found people to surround Giannis with, which in regular season basketball clearly was about as effective as you can get. But come playoff time, had some massive holes. And so that's my point is that. How do they react to the playoff? The disparity between their playoff actions and their regular season actions, and are they going to try and now build their team more with the playoffs in mind?
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm with you on Middleton. I don't think he's the future. I think he's a good asset. If I'm building a championship team, I'd love for him to be my third best player. I'd love for him to be like I'd love for him to be my Kuzma to my AD and LeBron. That feels like a championship core to me that involves Chris Middleton. I do think if there's anything we saw in this playoffs, though, Giannis needs another star. Not necessarily someone of his caliber, because you're not getting Luka Doncic or LeBron, but in the sense that I think you just touched on it, but one of the biggest things we saw from this Bucks team is that, you and I have talked about this formula plenty of times, but they can just crash the lane, make Giannis's life hell, and force everyone else to step up. And just the fact of the matter is these other guys in this roster aren't built to step up to the level they needed to, especially when Giannis was hurt. We saw it last night. But I do feel like someone like Chris Paul makes a lot of sense because he doesn't have the value of a young star on the trade market, but he has the ability of a bona fide star. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Someone to pair with Giannis. But my greater point here is, regardless of who it is, I do think that you need, if you're the Bucks, you're in a tough spot because you need to find someone to pair with Giannis to make this team championship caliber. Because as great as he is, I'm getting a little off topic here, but I go back to all the different iterations of the Cavs that LeBron had, and we would both agree. I forget how you exactly worded it, but that Giannis is the most dominant player in our lifetime since LeBron. Those were your words you used, correct?
Did I? Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Something to that effect. The most polarizing player, the most dominant offensive presence, something like that. You said something to the effect of him being like one of the best players we've seen in our lifetime since LeBron came into the league, which I think most people would agree with. If he's not the best player, the best young player in the league right now, he's top two. To that point, when I look at those teams that LeBron had with the Cavs before he left for LA, the one that won had Kyrie. The ones that didn't had good pieces, but kind of looked a little bit like this Bucks team. Guys who could play and could make plays, but will also maybe aren't the guy you want to have the ball, who's maybe not the guy who you want to have the ball in his hands when LeBron can't have the ball in his hands. You know what I mean? And so I feel like, in a sense, Giannis doesn't need a LeBron, but Giannis needs his Kyrie. And I think Chris Paul makes a lot of sense in that if that trade ever were to work out. But the hard part, and this is, I know I'm word vomiting, but I'm getting somewhere, I promise. The hard part of all of that is that you really only have a year to do it. You really only have next season to piece it together. Because odds are, if you're not piecing together a championship team and you don't have plans to next offseason, like you don't have concrete, this is how we're going to do it, it makes sense for Giannis to walk. If Giannis in any way feels like the system he's playing in has not set him up to win a championship when he's one of the best young players in the league and is now multiple years into his career, you almost look, if you're him, you almost have to look at those years as a waste of your career or a waste of part of your prime. And if I'm Giannis, I'd want to leave. And so that's the quandary I feel like the Bucks have, is needing some kind of big piece to go with him, but not having the luxury of time.
It's a great point. Yeah, it's a spot on point. It's a spot on point. And yeah, just those type of, perfect B pieces, those perfect sidekicks don't just grow on trees. You know what I mean? Those are, exactly. That is debatably, one of the most difficult pieces to find behind a superstar. You know what I mean? It's almost more difficult to find the person who complements him well. So yeah, I don't know. There's a whole lot of intriguing options out there. I wonder, there's Drew Holiday in New Orleans makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. I'd be somebody who'd want to buy low on De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento if he became available. Because I'm trying to think of guards. That's probably the reality here. Yeah. Is that as Eric Bledsoe was better this postseason than I think he was last year, but he's probably still not the answer. And so, to me, the position that to me screams for the most improvement would be some lead guard position. So, thankfully, that's the deepest position in the league, but it's a tough hill to climb, like you just said. You summed it up well. They have a year. The clock is ticking right now, and it's a terrifying clock. I don't think anybody in Milwaukee, new ownership group, who devoted their entire franchise's outlook hinges on Giannis, and so making his life as comfortable as possible this year has to be their number one priority.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've talked about this. The free agent class is not great. I mean, there are plenty of solid players who have things like player options and could hit the market, but won't. And the options just aren't. This isn't last year when Kawhi was moving and Anthony Davis was moving, and you had all these big name stars making moves in the offseason. That's just not where we are this coming offseason. That sucks for the Bucks. The one offseason they needed to really make a splash. I also have to imagine they didn't probably expect to have to make a splash. That's probably a hard part of this too, is they probably didn't enter this, or even like a month ago, enter, July or August thinking we need to make a splash this offseason they probably thought we're a championship caliber team because we all did. How could you not? They won 6,000 games in the regular season. Like, that's got to suck too. Like, thinking you're one thing and then having no time to adjust to what you really are. That sucks.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And so you wonder how much of that was their own sort of drinking their own Kool-Aid to a certain extent. Like, I wonder how much they weren't looking at themselves critically in the mirror because, like you just said, they had a historically great regular season. They looked like, the team, then back-to-back MVP. Like, they looked like the team of the future. And it just, I don't know. One playoff series can do a whole lot for just, completely decimating the perception we had of a team and the superstar. I don't know. That's the other part of this is that Giannis played well in this series, and obviously missing a lot of Game 4 and then all of Game 5 was not helpful. But there, some questions have to arise about his viability, about what kind of players fit around him, what kind of changes he needs to make to his game. Like I said, I am not envious of anyone who has to figure this stuff out. It just seems like next level basketball stuff that's going to be, that's going to obviously, kind of determine the league. It feels like for the next couple of years, if the Bucks can figure this out, they're a perennial championship contender. But if not, this is one of the all-time missed opportunities.
Oh, absolutely. We talk about changes in perception of a team, and this is a weak transition, but I know you want to talk about these guys. I know deep down you want to talk all about these guys, and I guess I'll start the Heat conversation by asking you, what did this series tell us more about the Heat of the Bucks? And by us, I mean those who weren't prophets and didn't know before this that the Heat were going to be a championship contender.
Jeff, you're too kind. No, I really do think most people were pretty high on the Heat. I think there was some writing on the wall.
But this high?
One more time?
But this high?
That is the reality. I don't know. I don't think people quite anticipated this. It's okay. So still, to me, it says more about the Bucks. To answer your question, as impressive as this Heat series win was, and as dominant as they looked, I still did not expect the Bucks to go down with this meager of a fight. I really didn't. You know what I mean? They were such a dominant. Like we just keep talking about, they were such a dominant regular season team, and they clicked. They hit so many of the boxes that so many of us expect from our championship contenders, and then they just go down, just like I said, so meagerly, so ineffectively. It was really surprising, even with the team, as like I said, as you've been talking about, as a team we're so high on in the Heat. I'm still more shocked by the Bucks.
And that's fair. I would probably have said the same, but I do think the Heat are worth discussing now that they've officially finished off this series, because I do think while we were high on them, and even though this did say more about the Bucks, I do feel like, in a sense, this was the proving ground. In a way, this kind of like sealed the deal a little bit that, like, okay, they are legit, because like the Heat always looked good in the regular season and looked pretty good in the bubble, like seeding games, and they swept Indiana. So it was like, okay, Indiana's pretty good, and they swept them. That's impressive. But all the games were kind of close, and they didn't have Sabonis, and and you wonder, was TJ Warren a flash in the pan? So you could have some question marks. But then they come out and they just oust the Bucks, and they just snuff them out easily. And that to me felt like, now they're legit. They were always legit. Like, they always had the potential to be where they are now, but now they're here and you can't deny it. And I feel like that's a new step. And this kind of solidifies what we already kind of believed, but maybe didn't know for sure about this Heat team. You know what I mean?
1,000%. We had to see it to believe it. Everything looked good on paper. Everything looked good theoretically. But until, it came down to it, until it came nut crunching time, these these Heat had some nuts to crunch. This was an impressive series, man. This was everything I think a Heat loyalist would hope for. You know what I mean? This was almost their best case scenario in a lot of ways. Just so balanced. Everyone seemed to be firing on all cylinders. You know, the shooters were hot throughout the series. Defense was as stellar as it's been throughout the regular season. It was just, it was about as perfect a series as you could hope for if you're Miami.
You have to be happy for Jimmy Butler. Even as a Sixers fan, like, you have to be happy for Jimmy Butler for finding his system where he can just be the guy and it works. Because I feel like in his last two systems, he just wasn't the only guy. He should have been the guy, but he wasn't the only guy. And I feel like this is a team where he clearly thrives. And it's wild because these dudes are entering the season, these dudes were a lot of no-names. And he's so high on them. You know, Jimmy Butler loves these young players, which is so dope to watch happen. And you have to be happy for a guy like that finding this fit. And I think the Heat story-wise are what we wanted the Thunder to be. What do you think of that?
Oh yeah. What do you mean?
You want me to expand? Okay. Well, we all thought the Thunder would be this young, growing, you know, exciting story. Obviously, they ran into a much better first-round matchup. But the Thunder, to me, were this one good veteran star in Chris Paul and a bunch of people around him that really rose to their potential when it mattered. And we were excited about them. They were a good kind of feel-good story. And I feel like the Heat were the same idea and were able to take it a step further. Granted, they didn't play the Rockets, but still, I see a lot of similarities there. And it's the Heat being able to do more with it in the playoffs.
I can totally get behind that. I can totally get behind it. It really is just such a refreshing, discourse from where we've been with these typically constructed basketball teams. You know what I mean? It's so nice to have a balanced team with real thought, it feels like, put into each and every player and just how they fit together, just the cohesion of this team. I don't know. It's really refreshing to see. And I can't wait for the conference finals matchup.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I suppose we can get into who they're going to meet in the conference finals because it's kind of hard to say, but it feels like it's going to be Boston. Would you agree?
I would. I mean, that game 5 was so dominant. They came out so hot, and Toronto was so cold. I think it was just a rough night from the jump for Toronto. But I think it still goes 7. I think Toronto pulls off game 6 tonight as we're filming. Yeah, like you said, it's Wednesday morning. Game 6 is tonight. So I believe my prediction is Toronto wins and we get a game 7. Because I do think these are two pretty balanced teams.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like you said, I think Boston's going to pull out. I don't know. The series comes down to one matchup to me. I've been thinking about this a lot. It comes down to the Jaylen Brown versus Pascal Siakam debate.
Yeah.
They're guarding each other, which is something I never would have anticipated. They're
right.
both. So that's been super fun to watch. They're both, it feels like, their team's second best player. And there's been a lot of discourse. I don't know if you've watched a whole lot of Inside NBA. I don't know, with the Chuck and Shaq and Draymond. We should talk about that. Draymond has been established star of the playoffs. He has been fantastic on TV. Chuck was like riding into Pascal Siakam about, you're the team's best player. You got to take better control. You got to, assert yourself. And I'm there thinking to myself, like, Kyle Lowry is their best player. I don't know why we're fooling ourselves. Kyle Lowry is their best player. You take what you can get from Pascal Siakam. That's kind of how I feel about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum being the Celtics' best player. You take what you can get from Jaylen Brown. And so whichever one of those secondary guys kind of takes that next step over the next couple games, that to me who I feel is who I'm going to ride with. And so I think I have slightly more faith in Jaylen Brown. And so yeah, I think we're getting to see Heat conference finals, which is about as all those bad memories from what was that 2012, 2011. That's all coming back. I can't wait.
Are we sure Kemba's not the second best player on the Celtics?
Ooh. No, I'm not. I'm not sure. Okay. You could easily make the argument.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference at the end of the day which one of them is officially the number 2, because I think your point about the matchup stands, that these two have kind of been going head to head, both in terms of second level production and guarding one another on the court. But Kemba as that 2B kind of complicates things even more in favor of the Celtics, just because I feel like you've got the Tatum and Lowry as your kind of lead dogs, and then you've got you've got this Brown Siakam kind of matchup, kind of head to head. Who's matching up with Kemba in that conversation?
About to be max player Fred VanVleet. We're talking about that poor free agency class. The number one winner of that, Fred VanVleet, baby. About to get a max contract, and because he's playing well, that's why he deserves to be in a conversation matched up with Kemba, because he has been playing well. His kids are back in the bubble, so Daddy VanVleet is here, and he's been solid.
Daddy VanVleet. Oh, I'm dead. Okay. You make a good point. I don't know if he's Kemba-esque, like fully. I don't know if he's Kemba level, but I wouldn't mind that being my number 3 player if I'm the Raptors. I mean, he was my number 4. Technically he was my number 4 player last year, and we won a championship. So that's not the worst. And he's gotten a year better. He's gotten a year older. So we'll see. And you're right about. I think the fact that he's going to be winning this free agent class next year is pretty awesome. Like, that's the best side effect of a pretty bad free agent class, is Fred VanVleet being like the guy in this class. Him and isn't it is it Steven Adams? It's some random big man. Who am I blanking
on? It's a bunch of Raptors.
Oh, isn't it like Marc Gasol? Yeah, Marc Gasol. That's
and
your
Ibaka.
guy.
And Ibaka. That's the crazy thing about this Raptors team. Is like their whole team comes up.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we'll have that discussion when they get officially eliminated. But they have a fascinating offseason.
Yeah, we'll dig into that one later. Because right now we are about, how far are we, Jay? We're about 25, 26 minutes in. Do you want to dig into the West? Is there any more on the East that you got on your mind before we get into the more intriguing conference?
No, I've been very excited about this Eastern Conference series. Raptors Celtics series. I'm hoping for a better Game 6. I think we're gonna get one. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's the thing. Except for that OG Anunoby game, it feels like there's been not blowouts. Might be a little strong to do it, but I'm hoping for some closer games. I think we're gonna get some. I think we're gonna get some closely contested matchups. I think it's gonna be Game 6 and 7, and would not count out Toronto from the least.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely 100%. I think a Toronto-Miami conference finals or a Boston-Miami conference finals would be pretty fun. I remember there was a point in last week's podcast, episode 3, where you said you wanted no part of the Bucks. That was your no part of the Bucks in these playoffs. You said it in a very fast and Jacobian way. But I agree. And therefore, I think any of the other 3 teams matched up together will be a fun conference finals. So we got our wish. The Bucks are gone. Goodbye, Milwaukee. I'm doing the Damian Lillard wave goodbye. But on to the West. We wave the East goodbye as well. We move on to the Western Conference. The first question I have, as we dig into the West, before we kind of get into specifics, this one trend I saw in game 3s. We got the Nuggets and we got the Rockets. Okay, both of these teams had leads late in these games, and by the buzzer, it wasn't that close. What does that say about the difference between the LA teams and the teams they're playing?
I think you already kind of know the answer. I think you're leading. I think there's a disparity, clearly. There's a disparity, and I think we all realized the gap was significant, but maybe we weren't giving credit to just how large that gap was. I love this Denver team. I think they have the horses to make it competitive with the Clippers. That's the thing. I think game 1 was a little misleading. But end of the day, they're just going to – Clippers in the final couple minutes are just going to put Marcus Morris on Jokic and Kawhi on Jamal Murray and just switch every screen, because that's basically their only action. That's end of the game. That's basically all the Nuggets want to do. And the Clippers are saying, fine, we'll do that. We'll just switch everybody. We don't really care. We're going to force Jeremy Grant to knock down shots. We're going to force Gary Harris. And it didn't work. Jeremy Grant, I think, missed 3 straight. There's 3 crucial misses within the 3-minute to 2-minute stretch. It just that's what these games are coming down to, is who has a stronger infrastructure, who has the role players who are a little more built for the moment, and just get lucky, plain out get lucky. And so, you know what I mean. I think you're right in the point that there is a massive disparity. But both the Nuggets and Rockets have made this respectable. That's the thing that I appreciate that there have been. It does not, neither the Lakers nor Clippers can really just lie down and just, rest their laurels. I think these are 4 overall very talented teams, and you know what I mean. I think both the Rockets and Nuggets are going to make this competitive.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we look at the Rockets and Lakers last night in Game 3, and like, correct me if I'm wrong, but for pretty much all of that game, the Rockets were either right within striking distance or leading, and then somehow in the fourth, like the Rockets won the first, they won the second, they lost the third by 3, and then they lost the fourth by 10. Like, that's a very even game where one team is just more clutch than the other. And this goes back to something I remember saying when we started the playoffs, and you and I think it was episode 2 probably. We talked about the fact that we talked about this with the Mavericks losing that game with the ejection to Kristaps. We talked about the fact that, like, when you're the underdog in a series, anytime you have the chance to win and don't, that's backbreaking. Like, it's just like, again, I go back to the Cavaliers and the J.R. Smith game in the finals, and just how they really should have won that game, and the kind of momentum you lose. It's like you're playing with house money, but you have a chance to use that house money and make it more money. And that's like, it's like if my dad gives me $50 and I bet it on Chiefs Texans to win, and the Chiefs lose, I shouldn't be mad because I didn't lose my own money, but I could have made money. I could have made more money. You know what I mean? And so I look at the Rockets and I look at the Nuggets too. Both teams had really good chances to win this game if they just close it out. I mean, they both had late leads. I mean, I'd have to dig into the exact numbers here, but the Rockets in the fourth quarter, I do believe, had a lead. They did. They led 85-84 with 10 minutes to go. And granted, 10 minutes is a lot of basketball. But within minutes, the Lakers clamped down and were up by 12. And it was a similar situation, probably to a lesser degree, for the Nuggets and the Clippers. And I don't think either of us expects the Lakers or Clippers to lose these series, but these game 3s felt, if you're rooting for the underdog, these game 3s felt more backbreaking than they probably look on paper, is my point.
I think it's a great point, Jeff. I think it must be slightly more painful if I was a Nuggets fan. I feel like that game was slightly more in reach. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it just feels like the Clippers are a little less dominant and when it comes down to it. When it comes down to the final 5 minutes, I don't know. We've been talking a lot about Kawhi versus LeBron. I felt like that dominated a lot of discussion last week. It feels like even since then, LeBron has elevated his game a little bit. I feel like each time we watch LeBron, it's a little bit better. He's cranking up the volume just a little bit more. And so that's super exciting to see. And I don't know. I would love to get an unfiltered sort of perspective on how he's viewing his body, how he's trying to sort of prepare himself. What does this grind look like? And what does, I don't know. There's a whole lot of elements here beyond basketball that are really fascinating to me. And I think this is, I assume both the Lakers and Clippers close this out relatively quickly because I think both of them are slightly looking ahead if I had to guess.
That's probably fair. I think I would be too. Do you worry, though, that looking ahead can trip you up?
No, obviously, if you're facing a team, I mean, both the Lakers and Clippers are facing immensely talented teams. If I was the Lakers, I'd be a little more scared to looking ahead just because, you know what I mean? This Rockets team has been incredibly talented. I don't know. I think that not the surprise of the playoffs, but one of the most shocking things is how well this Rockets revolution has worked in these playoffs.
I agree.
It's a massive testament to PJ Tucker. I don't think any of this is possible without PJ Tucker, and you're not just finding those. They don't just grow on trees. And so that's the main reason I don't feel like this is super replicable going forward. But what they've done to basketball changes so many of the fundamental sort of core principles that we just held true. You know what I mean? I think they've completely transformed the court, and it's obvious every time that James Harden gets a wide open layup that this is just a whole different way to look at basketball, a whole different way to maneuver players and to manipulate the court. And so, a testament to them.
Yeah, I agree. Um, in that vein, you mentioned PJ Tucker. I again have to throw in Jeff Green, 16 points on 11 shots last night in game 3. Like, he's contributing, and he's one of their bigger dudes. And the idea that, like, they're trotting out this tiny lineup and this taller bench player is able to contribute 16 points. That's encouraging too, that you have this guy who can do that off the bench. Because again, I know I mentioned the last podcast, this is a guy that I would not have pegged for any playoff production, and he's putting up some good numbers. So just a side note, good shout out to him. Good job, Jeff Green. But one trend in this series that we need to discuss. Last night, we talk about the Heat and how balanced they are. Last night, the Lakers, LeBron and AD combined for 62, and Harden and Westbrook combined for 63. I guess my question is, for you, pure basketball, fandoms of the Lakers aside, do you prefer a game like that or a game like a Heat Bucks game where no one is really like, where everyone's contributing, no one's dominating? Would you prefer watching a game where it's 63-62, Harden, Westbrook versus Davis and LeBron, or do you want to watch a game where everyone's got 15?
I mean, I'm not going to complain either way. Here's the reality: is that they both have their intricacies and they both have things that make them beautiful. But the reality of these super top heavy teams, like we're talking about, is that it's a lot of isolation ball. That has been the core of this Lakers Rockets series. It kind of feels like it's either isolation or transition. There's not a whole lot of like set offense, and that's to me what makes it watching the Heat so enjoyable. Is that I love the system that Spoelstra has put in. I think they have just a group of players who fill a role and who each kind of have just made the best of their situation, and they're such a cohesive unit that to me is a slightly more pleasurable basketball watching experience. But I'm not going to crap on isolation ball. I think that's done a little bit too much. I think people crap on it too much. I still think there's so much beauty in what James Harden does, and I mean, obviously, there's so much beauty in what a LeBron and Anthony Davis pick and roll with shooters surrounding it is such a beautiful basketball play to watch in so many different ways. You know, the vision that LeBron executes on those plays, and just I don't know, like you just said, it is a beautiful, cohesive basketball play, and so I can't really complain either way. But if I had my druthers, I'd probably watch more motion-oriented, team-involved basketball. I think that is slightly more preferable, but I can't complain. These single-handedly dominant efforts by someone like LeBron or James Harden are still so visually appealing to me that I'm not going to complain either way. How about you, Jeff?
Yeah, Jacob, much like what you said, I can see pros and cons to both. I love the idea of a team that is good because they work so well together, like the Heat. And I love watching guys like Harden and Westbrook just explode. That's like, there's something really fun about, as a basketball fan, watching, there's something really enjoyable, I'll use that word, about watching a really good, well-constructed team, well-oiled machine, like a Heat. Just because it's good basketball, it's good team basketball. But there's something exciting about watching a Harden Westbrook tandem tear you up for 63 points, even in a loss. Because, and I guess I'll say this. I think the more I think about it, my vote goes to I'd rather, for pure entertainment value, watch a team that's not balanced, as long as they're good. Like, I don't want to watch like a team, if James Harden and Russell Westbrook were dropped on the Hornets and lost every, I wouldn't want to watch that game. That team would suck. But as long as the team is good enough to compete, like the idea of like, I guess the thought in my head I have that I keep thinking back to is, when's the last time you walked up to a buddy the day after a game and said, dude, did you see how balanced the Heat were last night? No, but you totally have said, probably to me many times, bro, did you see Jamal Murray drop 50 last night? I'd be like, bro, that's how you talk about basketball after a game. If I would love to sit down and, it would stimulate, our intellect to watch a Heat highlight tape and look at all the ways they excel. But no one's talking about that mainstream. The entertainment value of the NBA has been as fun as it is as basketball fans to watch really good teams play each other, Bucks Heat. The NBA's, and this is why the West is so much more popular, because the NBA's entertainment value is in dudes who are really good going off. That's what makes the headlines. Would you agree?
Couldn't disagree more. Couldn't agree more.
Couldn't disagree more, Jacob. Wow. Let's
Getting real
fight.
crazy.
We haven't fought on Jacob. If those who don't know, Jacob loves fights and will encourage them at every turn. So I wouldn't be surprised if you wanted to fight over this. But
physical fist fights. That's the only way to settle any sort of altercation.
Bingo. Go over to the fitness center, put on some boxing gloves, throw hands.
No, it's a great point, Jeff. It's a star-dominated league through and throughout, and I think that, like you just said, last night was a great example of that. Those are the games that are truly the captivating ones, and so I think we've gotten a nice mix of that this postseason.
Yes, I would agree. That said, though, we can't just call the Lakers a top-heavy team night in and night out because, they are, but they've had their role players, and we know that as good as these top two guys in this team are, you can't win it all without the role players doing something. And your big concern during the playoffs was who on earth was going to step up. Would you have guessed it would be Rajon Rondo with 21 points last night in a Game 3 win?
I think I would have guessed you or me ahead of Rajon Rondo. I just had such little faith in Rondo coming into these playoffs. I don't know. It just I kind of thought that hand injury was a blessing in disguise. I'm not alone in this. This was kind of the thought of Lakers Twitter, was that the hand injury would allow for more time for someone like Caruso or Danny Green or KCP to really establish themselves as that third guy, as that lead guard. And just sadly, it never happened. Danny Green's had an awful bubble. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has not been much better. Caruso's been solid, but they are still looking for that third guy, and especially they're looking for a lead guard. And after last night, I wonder if they found it in Rondo. I mean, Rondo looked fantastic last night. He was hitting threes. He was playing good defense on Harden. I mean, he checked a lot of the boxes that you're looking for out of that third guy.
Yeah, I'd agree. And on top of him, Kuzma added 14, so that's always an encouraging thing because he's their three, I would say, as far as not three like small forward per se, but and he can play the three per se, but three in terms of their number three. Like we talked about this earlier. Chris Middleton was what I wanted to see. I wanted to see him be like a Kyle Kuzma, a third guy behind two elite stars. Not that Chris Middleton isn't a star. Getting off topic, but that's encouraging as well because I know there were question marks around him and how much he'd produce coming into these playoffs and especially into this Rockets series. So a little shout out to him. But one thing I mentioned to you before the podcast, and if there's ever going to be a topic about the Lakers, my ethos and your ethos are two very different things. Much like a conversation about bracketology would favor my ethos. So we're going to go to you on this one. I want to ask you, as someone who's watched the Lakers all season, if I were to tell you that 4 players on the Lakers would have all but 11 of the points in Game 3, would you call that a win or a loss? Would you predict a win or a loss?
Ooh, I would assume loss. If I'm being honest. As much as as top this Lakers team has undertaken a similar construction all season. They've been top heavy the entire year, and they kind of just filled in the gaps where necessary. And it hasn't. It's been successful in the regular season, but to me, that does not feel like a recipe for success come playoff time. And I think it speaks to the greatness of LeBron and Anthony Davis, but I think it also speaks to the intellect of Frank Vogel. I think he's been getting a lot of criticism this playoffs. I think he has. There have definitely been some questions about his rotation and his sort of willingness to be flexible. And end of the day, he has been an above-average coach to me who has installed some really sound defensive principles. And to me, that has been the defining factor of this Lakers playoff run, has been the defense has been exceptional.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason Rondo has looked as better. I'm so praising of Rondo is that his defense has been exceptional. Kuzma is playing with a lot of effort and is playing well defensively. And just kind of, like I said, filling in the gaps where necessary. And that starts on the defensive end.
Yeah, you talked about the fact that if anybody, this series was in this playoffs was going to be Frank Vogel's kind of proving ground. I know you comped him to some other coaches who had this opportunity where this is where they were going to prove if they're the guy in this system, in a sense, because we all know LeBron is the sticking point in this system, and you build a coaching staff around LeBron. And I think we've seen it. Anyone who holds the Rockets to just over 100 points in a playoff game is doing something right. And I think Granted, you've got two great defenders on this team. LeBron and AD aren't just offensive weapons who can combine for 62. They're great defenders, some of the best in the league. But defense isn't a two-man game, and credit where credit is due to Frank Vogel for, as you said, developing a defensive system that is working against a team that is apt to put up 140 in a given night. So mad props, I would echo on that. I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the playoff discussion. Do you have anything else before we move on to a little bit of a special topic?
Nothing much. I think we touched on it a little off camera. I think we're ramping up to this Lakers Clippers. I think it's, I don't know. Personally, everyone projected it. Everyone, spoke it into existence to a certain extent, and I never really wanted to believe it. I don't know. I wanted to hold some level of pessimism or some level of, I don't know. I wanted to be different in that there would be some different conference finals matchup, but it's as we're creeping down to it, it looks like it's gonna be Lakers Clippers. We're gonna get the matchup everyone is hoping for, and yeah, I can't wait to see how that goes down, because I don't know if, save for those Golden State series, I can't remember the last time LeBron was this big of an underdog, or this big of, at least, you know what I mean? I think the Clippers have a better supporting cast, a deeper bench, and end of the day, it's going to come down to these two. It's going to come down to LeBron and Anthony Davis versus Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and I can't wait to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I'm 100% in agreement with you. Things I'm also very excited to watch. We'll make that the transition. If you can't tell already, we pride ourselves here at the Sideline Until NBA podcast on really cheesy transitions. And that's all me. I shouldn't say we, but we're going to go with another one. Things we're very excited to watch. This unfold, what we're about to talk about. Today, John Rothstein, we're going into college. We're going into the college game, which makes me very happy. Pumps all the kinds of serotonin through my veins. We'll start at 10:04 a.m. on this fine Wednesday, September 9th. John Rothstein tweets, source, the ACC will propose that every single team in Division I make the NCAA tournament. John Rothstein then tweets at 10:09, 5 minutes later, source, the ACC has already had discussions with Dan Gavitt and the NCAA regarding an NCAA tournament featuring every Division I team. We fast forward on to 10:10, a minute later after that, and this is where it gets wild. Source, all ACC programs, that's all 15, agreed today to have every single Division I team in the tournament. Several are expected to release official statements later today. This is being done to, quote, celebrate college basketball. 15 out of 15 teams in arguably the best conference in America all agreed on this crazy tournament idea. Now, real quick, I will say this. That's wild, first of all. Second of all, though, I think I have to imagine the reason we're talking about this is because we know that the regular season is going to be an absolute mess. There will be no common thread comparing resumes. It will be unfair to compare resumes between one team to the next, because some teams will have the opportunity to play 8 Power 5 teams in the non-con at Mohegan Sun, and some teams won't have a non-con, and they'll play 16 games in Conference USA, and that's just unfair. And so the idea of making the NCAA tournament as such a widespread event that everyone gets to be involved in, almost like a convention of college basketball, like a meeting of all the minds kind of thing. It A, is a revenue generator for the NCAA. It B, levels the playing field. And it C, gives everyone an opportunity to play on that big stage regardless of what they're able to build in terms of regular season schedule. And I think the biggest reason that all of this is the case is, and pardon my French here, I'm reading a quote, Jeff Goodman just tweeted, the most common 2 words I continue to hear from coaches and ADs involving college basketball right now. Any guesses, Jacob?
Nothing good. Nothing. I'm waiting on the punchline here. I can't. I have no good guesses.
Shit show. And what that tells me is nothing is figured out. None of the non-conference stuff is figured out. Who knows what conference is going to play? And at the very least, we're going to have a massive March Madness.
I hope. Okay, I don't know. So I think it's hard to talk about college basketball without talking about college football and to me, the absolute horrendous job the NCAA has done as a whole. It feels like
Absolutely.
the fact that they're kind of just saying, hey, each conference handle this on their own and figure it out is just such a recipe for disaster. I think we're already kind of seeing it in college football, just the disparity in opportunities for these student athletes is discouraging. You know what I mean? They've already made nice, accommodations in terms of eligibility and how many years this is, but it's still not a perfect situation. And it seemed like college basketball had a slightly better hope of turning this around in terms of they had already talked about a bubble format. And even as we're talking about it now, what is a tournament if not a bubble to a certain extent?
Exactly.
I wonder how much you're going to try and just replicate a bubble, in a tournament setting. I'm not exactly sure how that would look with 354 programs, 356. Correct my math?
I think 353.
Okay. So not exactly sure how that would work. I don't even know how we were trying to do the math off screen. So that's 8 quadrants of seeded
about 4. It's 8 quadrants of about 44 teams.
I am so ready for the first 44-1 upset.
Yes.
I need that in my life.
Now, there are many different ways you can format this, though. That's the thing. You could totally you could do it World Cup style, and do you know how the World Cup picks its bracket?
Kind of.
Take that as a no. Okay. Essentially, the teams that make it, they split them into I think they're called pools of 8. It's 4 groups of 8, and what happens is, so the first pool is the top 8 teams in the world based on the FIFA ranking, and the next 8 is all the teams that made it from the Americas, and then it's 8 teams from Europe, and then it's 8 teams from Asia and Africa, and then they pick 1 out of each, so you're getting a good smattering of everybody. So what I'm thinking is maybe you do a pod system where you have a bunch of pods of 8 and the winners get into a bracket. And so you have, the way you do it is you put every conference winner in one pool, and you take 1 from each, and then you take every kind of tier B team, 1 from each. So you're getting a good smattering of ability levels and conferences, so you don't put Duke and North Carolina in the same pod, So this doesn't necessarily have to be a single elimination thing. And if you play somewhere I know they've talked about this, and I know the city very well. It's where I've lived for the past year. They talked about Indianapolis, and that's where the Final Four is going to be this year. I know you've got Bankers Life, where the Pacers play. You've got Hinkle, where Butler plays. You can go down to Bloomington. It's only an hour from the city. That's where Indiana plays. And you can have several different venues, and you can play at the convention center in downtown Indy. And you can put each pod in a different venue, take a bigger city with 8 courts, and you have 8 pods, and each one is its own bubble, and only 1 team leaves that bubble. What do you think?
I don't hate it, Jeff. I love any of these ideas that get us basketball. I think there's one idea of, like you just said, a bunch of little bubbles, 1 massive bubble, 3 big bubbles, you know what I mean? If they're going to do hubs, I think there's a bunch of different ways they could go about this. I'm glad they're at least talking, because I don't know, sports are going on without a bubble, and I think I've been proven wrong about MLB. I didn't think MLB would work at all without a bubble. It's working okay, and so
I don't think you've been proven wrong. I think they've just trudged on without you. You know what I mean? I don't think you've necessarily been proven wrong. Maybe you haven't been proven right because they're still playing, but it hasn't been perfect. I mean, the fact that at one point the Cubs were 13-3 and the Cardinals were 2-3 is hilarious. First of all, I think that's amazing. Can you imagine if we reached a point in the NFL season where the Chiefs were 7-1 and the Chargers were 1-1 at the same point? That'd be amazing.
I don't know.
I kind of want that now.
I do want a team to make the playoffs on a technicality, their 4-2 record is a better win percentage than, you know what I mean, the 9-7 or something like that. That's my hope. I don't know. It's so wild. It's so wild to me that they're trying to do this. And I was listening to Peter King had a talk with Roger Goodell, and Roger Goodell was like, the safety will come first. every decision is a safety-based decision rather than a competition-based decision, and I respect that. But then the integrity of this season is just so in question. I just you can't have your cake and eat it too. It feels like you either do what's fully right, safety-wise, or you just try and make it a real season. It's hard to try and do both.
It's difficult because we're getting so far off basketball, but this has been a good conversation. And I think it's worth listening to. So you should keep listening if you've made it this far, which you probably haven't. Anyway, I think it's difficult because we've seen it in baseball. At the beginning of the season, it was a mess. And we know it's because players weren't following protocols. And things seem a little better now because players are following protocols. So it's really a question of, do you trust the players and coaches? Because it's what we're seeing is you can still bubble yourself and travel when you're at the level of an MLB and NFL and you can charter planes and buses. You can still bubble yourself. Football's harder because you're hitting 53 dudes, but I know they've got redesigned helmets and all this. We'll see. I do think it's possible to stay bubbled and do the whole traveling thing, but it's like going to be walking on eggshells, walking on ice kind of thing. Like you just know at one turn, any elite player or any player, not to say that the elite players are more worthwhile, but like any player could get COVID, and not that, and I say the elite player thing, not to distinguish who matters more, but in a dollars and cents way to the league, like Patrick Mahomes getting COVID is like devastating to the league's value. Anybody like that. Not only are you losing one of your brightest stars, but it's your fault that you lost him. So it's entertainment value and it's PR. Get what I mean? But the fact of them, I would like to make it very clear, though, that I am not saying that it'd be worse in general if a Mahomes got it versus a role player or a bench player. That's clear, correct? Okay.
Yes,
I'd like you to say yes so the fans know.
Yes, Jeff. I am not. You are not a heartless wench.
But my point checks out, though. Like, that's a double-edged sword.
Certainly. And I don't know. I go over this to a certain extent. It's like baseball. We keep going back to baseball just because they are the lab rat here. They are the test case. And if everything happened with baseball that happens to football, I'm not really sure how a season goes on. Just because I don't know. I think I made this point to you off there, but baseball, their first game of the season was Nationals defending champ versus the Yankees. And Nationals' best player, Juan Soto, missed the game because of a false positive test. If that happened in the MLB, if the exact equivalent, the best player on the defending champs missed the league's highlighting game, the season opening game, hell would break loose. The entire world would fold in on itself. I think, you know what I mean? So just baseball.
Because 0-1 in NFL, sorry not to cut you off, but 0-1 in NFL and 0-1 in MLB are night and day.
They're not even comparable. And just the idea that, I don't know, that NFL coaches are going to be okay taking that risk and be like, yeah, we'll just, you know what I mean? I'll just accept this crappy season because I want what's best for my players. That'd be nice. I'd love to live in that world, but I don't think that's our reality. I think people are going to make poor decisions in the effort of trying to make a season happen. And that's scary to me. That's scary with news of, a college football player dying today from complications of COVID-19. I think there's so many unanswered questions that I think it is incredibly bold of the NFL to trudge ahead with this. And circle it all the way back. I'm curious how college basketball has the benefit of waiting, has the benefit, it seems like, of watching everyone make these mistakes. And so I'm curious how, because they could theoretically follow the same path of baseball in that not every game is as crucial and we can have teams with slightly different, total games played. And so I wonder if they try and implement that.
Yeah. I mean, to stick back into basketball, because we are a basketball podcast. Well, if anyone here felt misled by the amount of football we talked about. We're so sorry. We apologize from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you'll forgive us and come back next time. And particularly listen at least as far enough to get to our ads so we can monetize. But um, but the college thing is interesting because, like you mentioned, they have had the most time to wait. They were the first thing to cancel other than the NBA, but now they've had the longest to chill because they weren't going to start again until at least November. I mean, the college basketball wasn't even supposed to start for another 2 months from today. Regardless of what they were going to do, they had 8 full weeks of NFL to watch and learn. And now people have made a great point that there's what's called the golden window right now in college basketball, where in theory, they will have, because of the way that schools are handling winter break, they will have from the end of Thanksgiving to the beginning of January with nobody on campus. Nobody. No classes for the players to go to. And if players are okay not having their winter break, which they will be, they've never had a winter break. Like, players don't get to go home for Christmas. They never do in college basketball. I mean, if they do, it's for a day. Like, for goodness sake, the amount of times I've seen my favorite team, Syracuse, play a Thanksgiving game, they miss holidays. It's happened. So theoretically, you can, if the NCAA had the ability to just say, we're doing this plan, you're accepting it, and didn't have to get all the sign-offs from all the ADs and whatnot, I would just say we're picking geographic groupings of non-conference matchups. We're lumping you all into groups of 8 to 10 in different cities. We're bubbling you there for those 6 weeks. You're playing everybody, and then you're playing your conference schedule like the college football season's going to. Because you have 6 weeks where no one's on campus and no one's in class. Makes sense, does it not?
No, it's
and
a great point.
A 10-team bubble is about the easiest thing to accomplish, I feel like, right now, health-wise.
I would hope so. I mean, so if we're just thinking it out here, 10 teams bubble means there's 35 bubbles.
Yeah.
And I don't exactly know, do they have so you do 35 biggest towns. And yeah, you're right, those do have the facilities.
Pick 35 college campuses. Put each team in a different dorm hall.
It's not the craziest idea. I don't know. So it's a great point though about this golden window, because I think someone else had made a less eloquent point that as these colleges send home students, it is kind of creating the perfect environment for these college athletes, and that, or
right.
The perfect environment in the mind of college coaches, and that there's no distractions, there's no parties to go to, there's no girls to worry about. It's just football and online classes. And and so I wonder if they try and replicate that in basketball, and they think, okay, all the students are home already. Let's just keep these students near campus and try and do this as normally as possible. I don't know. I'd like to think they're bubbling though. There was some early talk of bubble. It seems the safest. It seems the most logistical, and I'd love to see the NCAA flex their muscles a little bit and make this work.
There was another John Rothstein tweet that goes along with this. It says, source, while non-conference bubbles have become a major talking point, multiple conference executives are reminding their programs that bubble plans are tentative at best right now. Fair.
Totally fair.
Now, can you imagine, real quick, just a random aside, can you imagine if we did bubbles based on preseason tournaments and the teams in the Battle for Atlantis got to spend 8 weeks in the Bahamas? That'd be sick.
Right. That'd be real fun.
And then the team is playing at Mohegan Sun, spent 8 weeks in Connecticut in November. What a disparity in life.
That we should do a power rankings of all the possible bubble locations based on the tournaments. Because you're right, Battle for Atlantis, Maui, those are top 2.
I say for one podcast we do a special episode and we just plan the college basketball season. We just play NCAA and we plan the season.
Honestly,
if you hear that podcast, make sure to like and subscribe or something like that. Right, Jacob?
Like, subscribe, rate, go follow us on Twitter, go follow us on Intel, all that stuff.
Anyway, clearly, as we learned in our college years, we could talk about anything like this for hours. No one wants to listen to that. So we probably cut it off here and talk off air. But is there anything else basketball related that you would like to discuss before we go off the air, my good sir?
Man, I nothing good, Jeff. Nothing as beautiful as that. I think, I'm playoff basketball. Can't beat it. These conference finals, I'm excited. I'm ready for it. I think we're gonna get some high level bad. Not that we haven't already, but I think we are truly maybe getting the 4 best teams. Save for the Bucks, I think these may be our 4 best teams. Whoever it is between the Celtics and Raptors.
I would agree.
I wouldn't. I'm not gonna be mad with anybody. So I can't wait. I think it's gonna be going to be a very fun couple of weeks, and can't wait to talk to you about it again, Jeff.
Let's do it. Well, I got nothing else to add. I'm with you. I'm excited. We've touched on a lot of bases today, and it's been a fun time as always, Jacob. Home is where the heart is, and my heart is with this podcast. So, I remember one time we ended one of our podcasts by saying the words "love" and "friendship," and that always stuck with me. So I will harken back to that. And with love and with friendship, we sign off of this episode 4 of the Sideline Until NBA podcast. Follow on Spotify, follow on Twitter, follow on Apple Podcasts, hit up sidelineuntil.com. Catch episode 5 soon. We'll see y'all later.